There are secrets that not even archaeologists can solve when it comes to ancient civilizations. Here are some shocking truths that have been unearthed about Atlantis, the Minoans, and much more. Iram of the Pillars. There's an ancient city in the desert of Arabia where a lost civilization thrived an estimated 2,000 years ago, and apparently the city may have been destroyed by a furious god as an act of vengeance. In the 1990s, archaeologist Nicholas Clapp announced an unprecedented discovery. He said that he found the lost city of Ubar partially swallowed by the sand of the Arabian desert. Nicholas used a whole host of modern technology to make his discovery. He looked at Landsat program data and images taken from the Challenger space shuttle. He also used ground-penetrating radar and data from NASA. All of this information allowed him to discover old camel trading routes moving throughout the desert. Nicholas tracked the trading routes to where they all converged at one major point. Centuries ago, the trails all led to an ancient waterhole in Oman's Dhofar region. When Nicholas arrived on site and carried out excavations, he found the ruins of a fortress. This thing had tall towers and high walls. Most of it was destroyed, and a large portion of it had fallen into a sinkhole. Sadly, the fortress had almost entirely been sucked into a hole in the sand. The fortress was part of Ubar, which up until the 1990s had been thought of as a myth, but in reality there was no myth at all. It was a real city that was built in the inhospitable desert. Nobody knows what happened to it, only that it's been eaten by the sands of time. In the Quran, there's a story of a city named Iram of the Pillars. According to the Quran, the people of Ad lived in the city. They had wicked lives and refused to heed the words of Allah, and as a result, Allah sent a sandstorm to destroy the city. The sand tornadoes raged for 7 days and 8 nights. Then, when the storm cleared, Iram had been completely buried. Many believe that Iram and Ubar are the same city. There isn't any proof, though there are a lot of coincidences. Ubar is a real city from a lost civilization buried under sand, and it may have been the inspiration for the story from the Quran. It's almost too coincidental not to be true. I wanted to give a big shout out to Jennifer Ballesteri and Anthony Shields. Thanks so much for watching and supporting OE. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Minoans and Atlantis. Everything you know about the lost city of Atlantis is wrong. The real Atlantis was located on the Greek island of Santorini. In truth, it was part of the ancient civilization of the Minoans. On the island of Santorini, a powerful civilization thrived over 5,000 years ago. Then, around 1650 BC, a volcano erupted with unimaginable strength. As a result, Santorini was buried under 200 feet of volcanic ash. The entire city-state was destroyed in an instant. It was like what happened in Pompeii, only on a bigger scale. But what does it all have to do with Atlantis? The great philosopher Plato was the only person in human history who ever mentioned a lost city called Atlantis. That in itself is enough for most mainstream historians to say it was nothing more than a fictional place, made up by one person. Plato described a beautiful island nation with a powerful military and advanced technology, but they were destroyed by the gods because they became too arrogant. It was similar to how Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by God when they became too sinful. Plato claimed that Atlantis was so military superior that they once attacked Athens, which was the beginning of the end for them. Humoring Plato, let's assume Atlantis was a real place. He described it as a paradise of flowers and exotic animals. Atlantis was wealthy, sophisticated, and strong. The only nearby civilization that matches that description was the Minoans, and they lived on the islands of the Aegean Sea starting in 3000 BC. Crete was their main island, but it's highly possible that Santorini also belonged to the Minoans. Oddly enough, the Minoans reached their peak in 1600 BC. They only started to decline after Santorini was destroyed. That makes sense considering that Santorini would have been extremely important. When the mainlanders learned of the island's obliteration, they knew Manoa would be an easy target. So there's a real possibility that Atlantis was in fact Santorini, and that the Atlanteans were really Minoans. The Lord Palace of the Kings. An ancient palace was recently discovered in Iraq, and scientists think it could hold the key to gaining more information about one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Dr. Sebastian Rey led the discovery of the ancient palace, which was constructed 4,500 years ago. It's being called the Lord Palace of the Kings, and it was uncovered in the Sumerian city of Girsu. Alongside the palace, researchers found 200 tablets written in Sumerian cuneiform. It's believed that these tablets contain administrative records from Girsu. That would make them some of the oldest bureaucratic documents known to humanity. Girsu itself is one of the earliest cities known to humanity. The Sumerian civilization put down the first stones of the city around 3500 BC. The invention of the written word took place within the confines of these very walls. At least that's the hypothesis put forth by most anthropologists. The first codes of law were created in Girsu, which was truly an important city in world history. Sadly though, after its discovery 140 years ago, looters descended on the ruins like hyenas. They picked through the site, stealing everything they could. Illegal excavations resulted in a massive amount of treasure and history being taken. But luckily they didn't get everything. Researchers now have the mud brick walls of the palace revealed, plus the administrative records. It's going to take ages to decipher them all, but it will be worth it in the end. The records could give unprecedented details about bureaucratic life in Girsu. The Thesaki Builders. Lucio is the name of the oldest human skeleton ever found in Brazil's São Paulo state. A new DNA study has revealed the astonishing tale of Lucio, along with the mysterious civilization he belonged to. Lucio lived in the São Paulo region over 10,000 years ago. He was a descendant of the original population who arrived in the Americas from elsewhere. Scientists say the first people settled here about 16,000 years ago, and Lucio was the descendant of those early settlers to the New World. Scientists from Germany's University of Tübingen wanted to learn more about the first true civilization in the Americas. To do this, they looked through ancient garbage heaps known as Middens. These were communal trash piles consisting mostly of shells and fish bones along with other organic waste, and sometimes they were used as territorial boundaries. But mostly it was just a way to put all the trash in one place. The people who built the Middens were part of the first true civilization along the Atlantic coast of Brazil. They thrived for thousands of years, then disappeared suddenly around the same time Jesus Christ came onto the scene in the Middle East. Lucio's skeleton was found inside one of the Middens. When scientists tested his DNA, they found that he wasn't a perfect ancestor of the people who arrived 16,000 years ago. Researchers looked at skeletons that were found in other Middens and discovered two unique sets of people. They both came from the original migration but separated into two distinct groups. One group lived directly on the coast, while the other group was more inland. They both built Middens and both mysteriously vanished 2,000 years ago. Scientists still don't know the full history of Lucio and his people, though this is a good first step at understanding them. More work needs to be done to uncover the scope of Brazil's first coastal civilization. Barar Temple and the Diliman. You've heard of Mesopotamia and you've likely heard of the Indus Valley civilization, but there was a third great civilization located between them that most people have never heard of. They were called the Diliman civilization. The Diliman appeared in the Persian Gulf around the late 4th millennium BC. They rose as a sophisticated society at the same time as the other cultures birthed in the cradle of civilization. And because they were in the middle of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, the Diliman were strategically positioned to get rich. They prospered heavily through trade, and their lands encompassed Bahrain, Kuwait, and a huge chunk of Saudi Arabia. The Diliman were interesting because they were a key trading partner of Mesopotamia, but they were far enough away to be mythical. The civilization was woven into the legends and folklore of the Sumerians. Sumerians believed that Diliman was paradise that existed long before the rest of the world. It was supposedly a land of pleasure and abundance. There were no diseases, people didn't get old, and nobody experienced pain. The lands of Diliman may have been the inspiration for the biblical tale of the Garden of Eden. In reality, Diliman was just a civilization like any other with a firm grip on the Persian Gulf trading routes. One of the coolest discoveries ever made came when a team of Danish researchers uncovered Barar Temple. It's an ancient Diliman sanctuary that was built in Bahrain 5,000 years ago. It was carved out of the stone on Jeddah Island 500 years before the Pyramid of Giza was ever built. The temple had altars that were fed by natural spring water, which would have made it look like a truly magical place. The temple was likely used to worship Enki, the god of fresh water and wisdom. Sadly though, only a handful of similar places have been discovered. And because the Diliman civilization lived in Saudi Arabia, it's believed that many of their greatest constructions are lost underneath the desert sands. If you were in charge of giving a name to a civilization that you established, what would you name it? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. The 3-star Mound civilization. New artifacts were just found in China from an ancient civilization the Western world knows very little about. They're called the 3-star Mound civilization. In Chinese, the culture is called Sangshan-Dui, named after the archaeological site in western Guanggang County. It was at the site of Sangshan-Dui where researchers just unearthed some new artifacts. The artifacts are unusual bronze figurines that seem to depict an ancient ritual. The bronze figurines are in the likeness of miniature people. The figurines are kneeling with both hands held together as if the individual was about to clap, and their heads are unnaturally twisted to the right. It looks like they were made to capture somebody in the middle of an important ceremony. Though, to be completely honest, archaeologists don't know what it means. The bronze figurines are more pieces of a seemingly unsolvable mystery. The ancient city of Sangshan-Dui was discovered in 1927, and scientists still don't know who these people were. The first big excavations came in 1986, and that's when scientists found troves of treasure buried in underground pits. Ever since, excavations have been ongoing consistently. Researchers have found jade treasure, mysterious gold masks, and fragments of textiles. All the artifacts point to a civilization that was steeped in religious intensity. In other words, they were obsessed with gods, mythical beings, and ceremonial rituals. The people of Sangshan-Dui may have been part of the larger kingdom of Shu, which dominated China more than 3,000 years ago. The city of Sangshan-Dui may have been the capital of the ancient kingdom, though it's not exactly clear. Nobody knows the extent of Shu nor of Sangshan-Dui. It was likely the first major city in Neolithic China, so there could have been kings and queens here. But sadly, there just isn't enough evidence to understand the history of what could have been China's most impressive ancient civilization. The Pew. Starting in the 3rd century BC, a very important civilization rose to power in the country we currently call Myanmar. The civilization was that of the Pew. While countries like Thailand and Cambodia are notorious for practicing Buddhism, they only got it because of the Pew. The civilization was responsible for the spread of Buddhism into Southeast Asia. The ancient civilization established itself along the edges of the Irrawaddy River. This was the same tactic used by most early civilizations. Rivers meant fresh water, which meant crops, fish, and life. Ancient records from the Tang dynasty in China say there were 18 individual states within the Pew's territory, and most of them were megalithic walled cities. This wasn't a backwater civilization without technology. Archaeologists have uncovered the ruins of at least 12 major Pew cities along the river. Researchers have also found several smaller settlements that weren't fortified, suggesting there were farming villages. Because the Pew were right beside India, they were heavily influenced by the rise of Buddhism. As ideas of Buddhism spread into the Pew's world, the same ideas drifted outward into the rest of Southeast Asia. And this is how Buddhism spread throughout most of Asia as a whole. Like so many other civilizations, the Pew were taken over by outside forces. Around the 9th century AD, invaders from southern China entered the region and destroyed their cities. But it's unclear exactly what happened, and the true extent of the damage isn't known. Researchers think raids from the north brought about the collapse of their civilization, and this resulted in the rise of the Kingdom of Pagan and much later the country of Burma. The Lost Kalahari. Deep in the Kalahari Desert is a civilization that's been lost to time. Nobody's ever found this place, but many have gone in search of it. Over 30 expeditions have journeyed into the Kalahari Desert over the past century in search of the nameless civilization. The legend began 130 years ago when American explorer William Leonard Hunt traveled to Africa's Kalahari Desert. The year was 1885, and William was in search of ancient history. As William traveled across the wasteland, he came across a series of ruins. The ruins were absolutely enormous, forming unbelievable structures. They looked like crumbling buildings left behind by giants. Williams wasn't in a great position to stick around and excavate. The Kalahari is a brutal place, and he had to continue on his journey. He did poke around, but not as much as he would have liked. When he got back to civilization, his story inspired other explorers to go looking for the ruins he left behind. The problem is that after 13 decades, not a single stone or piece of pottery has been recovered. Some think that William Hunt was nothing but a liar. If true, his lies led to dozens of failed expeditions. Others think that because the Kalahari is so big, finding the lost city is like trying to find a needle in the desert. The search continues still. There were expeditions in the mid-2010s that used Google Maps to look for anomalies in the desert. They also used aerial surveys to hunt for signs of a lost civilization. The researchers uncovered weird rock formations that could have been mistaken for ruins, but sadly they didn't find proof of the nameless people who supposedly lived in the Kalahari Desert. If you had to go back in time, which of these civilizations would you choose to be a part of? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.